Hi and welcome to this video. In this video we will cover how you can use all the capabilities in Figaf to manage your cloud integration as DevOps. What is the perfect way to manage integrations? And the idea is you can take whatever part of the tool that you want. If you just want one of the components, then you can take that. But obviously the bigger picture is much more relevant in this. So as with the other videos, we have also created the other video about how to install, how to manage migrations. And in this one, we will cover how to run DevOps with your SAP Integration Suite. We'll cover a number of different things. We will cover the transport process, because I think obviously it's quite important. We'll cover how you create test cases, run them, manage them, and then we will cover some monitoring and we'll cover some Groovy editing. There's timestamps here at the bottom of the screen, so you can go to the precise area where there's something you want to check out. Okay, transport process. This is a long topic that we want to be discovering, but so the goal is, with the Figaf tool, we want to give you a much better understanding of what's going on with your integration. We created this some time ago. I'm not sure it's the most ideal, but still somehow it tries to capture what it is that we are going to set up. So here we have the number of tenants that you have. Figaf will then create synchronized objects, which means it will keep a version of those artifacts inside of its own database. And this you can use to versioning. Once you're finished with something, you can add it to a ticket. You can also add it to a ticket when you start developing on it. We can test the changes with the tool. That's the testing part, and it's a part of the ticket that in general you would be adding to it. We can then create a transport, say now we want to do this. We can also configure them. And then we can select it to be imported to QA. We import it, and then we configure and deploy it in all one go. And then we can do the same thing from there, QA to prod. One interesting thing to note is we create instant transport between these things, for all the different areas. And obviously testing is important, but we will cover that more in details later. Virtual tenants. So this is one of the topics we decided to add because it's important. We've seen a lot of customers before us, and I've also done it myself, create iflows in my dev environment and add a pre or post fix for these things. And this works out really well in the beginning. At some point in time, you get to quite a number of different iflows, and it just becomes too big of a bottleneck to work with all these things. And then you need to figure out, okay, how do we manage these things? We can set this up when we're configuring the landscape, and we can work with this scenario here. It's about simplifying the transport. And if you, for instance, have process direct GMS, all of these attributes can get a prefix like QA added to it. So that means we would have a fully functioning process direct internal processing. Ideally, there could obviously be some things that we are missing for this, but in general it should work. And that means if you're moving it into the QA, we'll add this postfix, and then once you move it from QA to production, it will be added or removed. Composite landscape. So initially we had, and I think you can still create this, complete landscape items where you create an item in dev, transport it into QA, and move it into production. If you had a problem in the QA, you need to create a new transport in dev, move this to production. And this was okay, but if you got more complex tickets or a number of iflows in a transport, it became more complicated to add, thus making it really difficult. And that's why we went with this composite, where you're creating a transition between dev and QA, and from QA to production. And this obviously makes it possible to scale more, do a lot of different things when working on this. So the idea is we'll create a transport to QA, we'll change it in QA, and then we can move it to production. And if we want to make changes in the configuration, we can do that also as a configuration change. So the landscape, when you go in and create it, is consisting of a number of different items here. Here we have the number of systems, and we have a description of this. The description needs to be unique for the specific tenant for some reasons. Just be sure it's okay to play around with this, trying to set it up. Once you have done some transport on it, you cannot delete this landscape for now, but you would have some tickets on it, so you need to remove those also for it to be removed. So play around, figure out what it is that you want to do on this. And if you figure out that you want to add a prod to this landscape transition, it's not possible. You need to start over creating new items for this. We have a number of different rules that you can set up when working on this. And this is, for instance, who should be approving this, who can import this into production. We have something about making snapshots. I think this was more relevant if you went with this full landscape cycle. With this transition, it's less relevant, but obviously it could be important for some reasons. And then we have this parameter mapping rules. This is about how we're translating iflow names, technical and other objects. In general, you just want to reuse all of them with the same settings. If you have defined the landscape like this, it knows that this is a virtual and would add the prefix for it, and then will remove it to the production one. So it's fairly easy to set this up, but you can go in and override these things. One thing to notice is when you're creating the landscape and the rewriting rules, an iflow needs to be unique across the tenant. So it's not possible, for instance, to have two iflows in dev that is going to be named the same in production. So be cautious of this, and this is especially true if you already have existing virtual tenants and all these capabilities. Rules, parameters rewrite. So one of the big thing we have is whenever you're doing a transport, you always need to remember, okay, so when I'm transporting to our QA system, what is the QA host name? How do I remember this? And you need to inform people all these things so they can configure it correctly. In the Figaf tool, it's really easy. You can just go in and say, okay, if we find an externalized parameter that's called this, we will translate it to this. This just saves a lot of time, making your transports much more resilient. You can also just add a change of dev to QA, but do be cautious. Do not change any values. They obviously mostly need to be system related things. So path, etc. could also be a good way if you wanted to change it. So yeah, there's a lot here. Deploy after transport. I think we covered these. Review. I believe it is really important to be able to do a good review on what you are doing, and this is one of the important things, and one of the things that the tool will assist you with. This is about being able to check, okay, so what is going on? Who made which check? Did they change the right thing? Have they followed all your guidelines? Have they checked all these components? That's a vital part of this scenario. And the idea is you go through this and then you can figure out, okay, we have some scenarios that, yeah, as an approver, you can set up who should approve. You can set up if you should not approve your own transports. But for making it a little easier, we can also can say we can approve them ourselves. We are not blocking anything unless there's something we think is technical impossible, like missing versions, etc. So it's all up to you to figure out what is the right review. Parameters, I'll show that on this stage. And then we have, okay. Cool. So let's see here. So one of the things is if you forget your URL to the Figaf tool, you can always find it in here in the router. This is the URL for your Figaf tool installation. You would obviously need to log in if you haven't logged into it first. Okay. So one of the things we can see, it's already created our sample landscape. But let's create a new one. So we can see here, we have there this individual and composite. And what we want to do is want to create a new one. It's for CPI. We can select here, we'll just select the two trials. So we call dev, and here we'll call QA. If we had multiple in, we would also be able to add it. Let's just add a new one also for prod. Not ideal, but it's easier. So then you have a better way of seeing all these things. So now we still have the option to go back. If we make changes to it, it will be overwritten. So here we have the name of the transitions. We have here enable replications. This is if you have transport from prod 1 to prod 2. Then these two items would be in sync. We have here deploy after transport, some naming validations that we can add that's a little more complicated, but it does give you some naming requirements. Require transport approval. Who should approve us? So let's see, it's just me. Who can import it, etc. And we can set up a schedule time. So once we have scheduled a number of items, we can schedule them to be imported at a specific time. Here we have all of these items, and you can see here you have something that's add prefix replaced by regex, and if you wanted to explore word circles, then you can see here. So if we want to replace this to, then we can see, okay, replace these Whitneys, and then we can see it is changed like this. So this is how you would work on these rules to check that it works. Here we have this parameter replacement where we can go in and add is there and here we have transport validation tags. So if we have some XSLTs, we can add these, and that means we will get a warning when we're trying to transport these items. Here we have additional complexity about denying certain transports or allowing them, or so we want to require that they have a certain tag before we can transport them, or deny and say if you have this tag, do not transport them. So there is different capabilities in this range. We have notify about, so we can send emails to specific people about what's going on in your landscape. So here you can go in and add your email address. Then you will get informed about what's going on with the landscape. And here we have webhooks. So the idea is, we believe the Figaf tool will not stand alone. You need to do integrations with a lot of other components. We have webhooks that would enable you to whenever you have pressed import or created a ticket or whatever, it will send an event to a webhook. In general, we will recommend that you just send it to Cloud Integration that can then route it into your backend system. That's all we need to do here, and we will press Configure Landscape. And it here will come up with this and will show the list of your landscape. Okay. And we can press Submit again, and then we can see that it's not gonna change anything. Okay, so now we have created a landscape, and let's see what we have in this landscape. So this is our landscape overview. We have it here, and we can see across the landscape. This is really a nice item. So we can see here if there's a difference between iflows that are configured and deployed. If you set this up and run it with your productive system, you will most likely see that there are some iflows that would have a different version configured than they actually have of their deployed items. Okay. So here, yeah, you can also go in and say, let's deploy an iflow. Deploy one or more iflows on this target system here. That's all good. So let's see, it probably will start soon. Okay. So I have two iflows. I want to transport them to. So right now I don't have much. We can put in filter here and search for faster. To go for the right packages. But the idea is once you have configured the landscape, you can start creating transports on it. And there's two ways to create transport. Either you will go in here from the landscape overview, get customer, and here we'll just search for CPI. And then we can take this, for instance, 3, and we can add it to a ticket. Demo. We will select the landscape that we're working on, which would then be this. So the transport needs to select the item we have, and then we'll enter the geo number, whatever reason we would have to make this change. So we'll go in here. Perfect. Then we'll request a license for the specific object, and that's good. And we can see here what it is. We can say here, so when we're working on the transport, we can go in and attach all dependent objects. Here we'll go in and say, okay, this iflow is using these script collections, these value mappings, all these things that is being linked to it. It could also be, so we can see here it's actually getting a script collection in. So it's using this faster script here. And we can start, so we can go through and check these things. If there's something we don't want on here, we can say, okay, let's just detach this, delete the links for this. So this would be the way you would go through and figure out, okay, so I know that there's some more. We don't want it for now, but let's start it here. So we open here the transporter. Now we can see we are getting some warning here. And the thing is, we are getting a tag that is called timeout is set incorrectly. And this tag is under here, the tagging rules. What's the timeout here? So in this timeout, we have created one that says if the property here is 6,000, we could go in and say, okay, there is a request timeout here that's should be a problem. You can go in and remove this if you don't think it's valid. Okay, so you can always find the tickets under here. And here you can see the ones, and on this overview here, on the ticket, we have the transports, and then we have transport configuration. But transport, ticket and transport, so a ticket always have a transport. Or can have multiple transport, as we probably will see here. So we can see this ticket is in transport because we selected it. So we created a transport. If we want to say, okay, there was actually something wrong, we can switch it back to development. and then we can start it again. So it's easy to create a new ticket with these items. So it says here there's not one blocking validation here, and here we can go in and see all these configuration hosts. So here we see this this problem here that we want to say, okay, let's replace this automatically, and we can just go here to the landscape and we can go in and say, okay, let's add it here. So let's just services QA and update the configuration. So obviously you need admin rights to update configuration, so it's not something that everybody can do. But the idea is once we go in here, we can easily see that these values has been replaced. And we can also see that we're missing something here, that's the OData password on both tenants, making it a lot easier to check. So let's just go and create it. So we can go here under security artifacts. We can create a new one that's called OData password. Don't think it's actually being used. But now we have that, and I think maybe if I press save, it will check and it will see that now it is created. So this was quite easy, a simple way to change these things. We have this inherit from source, inherit from target, and these are really important. So if you have an iflow that already is deployed in your QA environment and you want to transport items to it, it has been set as inherit from target, which means we would use the configuration that's already set up in the QA system. And this is to ensure that we don't just overwrite something that should not be overwritten. If you're saying inherit from source, that means that the development or the item that we transport owns this value. And you can also go in and say, hey, we actually don't want anyone to manage it. We want to set it ourselves. So then you will remove this inherit from source. So play around with these, figure out what it actually means for you. And when we press save, we will be able to see what's going on. And here we can also see this is the name in the QA, and it does not exist already. Okay. We can also check the design guidelines to see what is actually running here. And we get a number of errors here. We can set up if someone had gone in and said skip for these things. That would probably be a good idea and a way for you as an architect to figure out what's going on. And another part here is we have this BPMN model viewer, a div viewer, div to HTML, iflow configuration. If you already have the data in your productive system or target system, you can use all of these. If you don't, I generally recommend that you use this one. Here you can go around and browse the full XML. If you go up and search for an externalized parameters, you can see that we have that value here called demo2 that is never used. So it's probably a good idea for us if we went in to delete it. We can see where we're using this API key here. So we're setting it in this value here. Not really sure what it does, but it's there. And obviously you should know more about your iflows. But and we also have here, if we wanted to configure this in an Excel way, or if we want to do sanity check for these things, we can go in, open it in Excel, and check all of the configurations, play around with the inherit from source and target. Once we have done that, we could upload it again. And then we'll show, okay, I've changed these two values. So this is real good if you have large transports and a good way to do sanity checks of these things. Okay, we can send it to approval. And in general, you should not approve your own transport. Here in the setting, we have this allow transport creator to review his own transports. And that means once we get into our transport, we can see here what is waiting for my approval, or what is my actions that I need to take. So I need to go here and I need to approve this. I can approve it. Yay! And now this is approved. I could also reject it, then I'll go back to the developer. If I wanted to, I could schedule it here. And then I need to set the landscape about when it should be imported. But now let's just deploy this item here. So we have the integration suite here. We have our monitor here. Do. So we can see these things have been deployed, and one of the things we would actually see if this one, if we open this one, view artifact editor. I guess it will not work because we have made the URLs invalid. So that will not work, but at least here we can see that it is now using it as a new address, making it a lot easier for us to deploy it. Nothing we need to do or simplifying the way we are working with these things. Okay. So that was one thing. We can go in from in here from the specific track objects to work on it. We could also go from here. So now we can see this is actually in our QA system. And let's take 2. So we can go and do, let's just make a modification to this one. So we want to open here. So we will go, so we can click on an object title here, and then we'll go to the object. Let's just do a edit here. I think this was an imported object coming from somewhere else. So if we go in here and change this value, I guess this is an old iflow. So we'll say save as version. It's 180. And let's just deploy it. A lot of different things has been changed. And let's just, for the sake of it, change this also to not deployed. It will be easier if you, but not deployed. So we'll go back here to the Figaf tool. So obviously we can go here from synchronize. And that obviously just require that you go in here, set up the host in the plugins, synchronize. So what we can see now, if we go in here, show them that there's a difference. We should obviously hopefully have been able to see this one. Here we can see it's a warning, so we can see that there's a design time version that's different than the deploy time version. Really important to notice these things, and we can see that it is starting here still. Okay, but if we wanted to transport multiple iflows, we can go in and we can create a ticket here, add it to a different JIRA number, whatever, the URL to the JIRA, and a description of what we're going to do with it. We can request the licenses for it. And now we have 2 iflows in here on our transport. We will start the transport. And we can open it. We can see we're getting the same timeout value. It's irritating, so let's should probably remove it. But what we can see here now, if we go in with this BPMN model viewer, we can see that it is this field that is being changed. And we have something about a not deployed value. It should have been the externalized parameters, and that's why we see it. And I can also go in here and diff to HTML and compare what is the difference between these 2 tenants. And as we can see, it seems like there is some difference between them. So let's just approve it and say OK, import. So yeah, you can if you you can go here and you can see the transport process. So we'll log all the steps here. We'll also log the errors, and this is really useful when you're checking, did it go all okay? So there are some problems here. Something about a user credential called null. Definitely something worth checking out. And here we have the traces. If there was some bigger problem on the transport, we can use this, and this would be the one that we would send to support. So we can get more insight about what's going on. Okay, so if we go here to our landscape overview, we can now see that there is something in the QA system. So if we just look at the QA, we can see we have all of these iflows in our QA system. If we wanted to, we can create a transport here. So selecting all the different lines, create a ticket, and then we will move this into our productive system. So this would create the transport first, and then we would import it. Here we don't have any approvers. That's because we had not set it up in the initial run. But now we have created our prod packet in the same component. Let's be clear, this is not really recommended for productive use. It works, but yeah, not ideal. So that's all you need to do. Everything is configured, deployed in the same tenant. So if we go here to our integrations, we can now see this has been configured and is on this landscape. So that was how to work easily with the Figaf tool for these things, simplifying the integration work, transport processes. I would urge you to explore these things, how it works, what you can see in these components when you're setting up the landscape, working with it, and well, I guess if you're going to migrate from cloud integration or from Neo, you can go and set up a landscape from Neo to Integration Suite, and then add the target Integration Suite landscape here. Then it's an easier way to manage the full Neo to Integration Suite migration. But underneath, it's the same engine. It's just a different starting perspective where you have the option to change some of the fields, change some of the packages that you're working on. Okay. So I think that was all we needed to cover about transport. So let's go back to the presentation. So yeah, this multi-stage is obviously important. How do you handle larger landscape? But I do think it's relevant what he has written here. But I think in general there's a lot of improvements in the tool with this composite landscape that makes it easier to do multi-stage. And multi-stage is the thing about both managing projects and so longer run projects like a month, multi-month, and then be able to support iflows in the same time. Webhooks, this is if you want to inform Figaf that there's a problem that's going on, or inform your change management tool that transport has been improved, imported, or is ready for import. Then you can use the webhooks, send it to Integration Suite. And the same is for the APIs, that we do have options that you can just put in the Swagger UI, HTML, and then you can go in and you can see all the relevant info about a transport. Okay. Here's the project releasing. It is possible, so the thing about having a project and move it in, but I guess you also need to figure out what's the best way for you to manage this, explore some of the capability, what works best in your scenario. You can use this thing about virtual landscape and use a virtual dev to production. Change, and I guess a lot of things is about reverting versions into the productive version, fix it, and then manually apply the changes, because there's not gonna be a automated way of managing these things, because the merges that you're going to make will always be complex. We do have this transport view overview here, and I think this is actually quite an interesting way to show. So if we go here in our tickets, we have 3 tickets now. We can see we have created this transport overview. We can see which tickets it related to, and then it shows that it was to issue number 3. So now we're in issue number 3. So that's the third. And look up here. So here we could go in and say, okay, what are all the transports that led up to this? So we had issue number 1 that created a transport, issue number 2 that created these things, and then we created issue number 3 on top of issue number 2 and 3 or transport. So this gives you a good overview of what's going on. You can also create reports here about everything that's going on. So if you need to use some documentation for your JIRA or whatever, this would be a good report that you could add. Let's see here. Here it comes. So here we have it, the attached objects, all the different iflows. You have the test cases, report, and the transport, who approved it, all these things that's important. Okay. Check the transports. Swap. Yeah, so the Git, we have an option to publish into Git. On the agent level, you can go in and say replicate to Git. That would do all the development you need into your Git repository. But yeah, it's not, I don't see it as something you'd use in the transport process. If you want to do extra validation, you can do it. You can also go in and check specific documentation fields to see how unit test has run, and you then, when you're doing your transport, be able to see the specific change. Okay, testing. So we started out as a testing tool. Now, as you can see, there's a lot more about this. So the idea is we need to find an iflow that you can trigger with Postman, Bruno, in the target system, and it's a lot easier to create test cases with this. Have CPI helper, and here's some of the different things we will try to cover in this session. If you wanted to do this in a lot of other ways, you're going to do a lot of development. The main focus is record replay. This is about being able to send messages, take an existing run and use as a template. We can mock all the endpoints that you want. So when you're sending messages, create employ, that service cannot be called multiple different times because the employee would then exist. With this, you can just create a new an endpoint that will say, hey, employee is created, this is the right value for it. This happens automatically. Reuse test cases in unit test and transports, MPL data stores also. You do have testing of confidential data. In an integration suite, it's a little less relevant because unless you have multiple different tenants, it becomes a little more difficult to have these things. We did have this CPI package, so if you search for Figaf, you will get this discover. In here, there's two iflow proxies that we're using. One is for process HTTP to process track, and one from HTTP to GMS. And this would allow the Figaf tool to send messages into the relevant scenarios without having to create a different iflow. If you are creating test cases for instance, an FTP or SFTP, Figaf tool does not know how to do that, so instead it will create a new iflow where it will replace the channel with something that it can, or an HTTP channel it can send messages into. Just why do we actually want to test? I think this is quite important because, yeah, no one want to test. It is really boring to be testing, but I do believe that it is some of the things that enable us to deliver integration faster. If we have a good library of regression tests, it would make it easier to see, we made some change here that would break everything else that we're working on, and therefore you need to have this. We can also simplify the testing because business users would not necessarily be able to create good quality test whenever you want it. With this, you can easily have test cases in, and then once you're getting some bug reports, you can just go in and say, okay, this is what we want, fix this, and use this as a component. And here the replay is the best. The other approach is about going in and creating assertions. We just believe everything should be identical except the part that should not, where you say, okay, ignore this element. Obviously, test-based development, we can also do that, where we will create a test case for these things. But let's get started with, well, let's try this. Okay. So the first thing is, if we want to create a new test case, we will go under here, integration objects. We have here an object that is called get customer 2. We can create a test case on this. So we'll create one that's called demo 6. And here we will, so when we're creating test cases, we can go in and select which landscapes it's a part of. We have an option to use if it's regression. Regression is the Figaf tool will send in the message. Baseline is if the external tool will send in this message. And you'd use baseline in the cases where you're integrating with a different testing tool that is creating orders in your SAP system. Then they would call the Figaf and say, okay, we have a regression test case, you can call it and then figure out what to do with it. So here we can specify the messages. So we have in and outbound, and we'll just say it like this. And we have a payload here. I think I had created a test XML here we can upload. And we'll just do the same one as for output. And then we can create a test case. And this would be how to create a test case if you have a test run scenario. Once we run this, the Iflow will be switched into trace mode. And we can see there are some problems here about what's going on here. An error occurred while sending. Cannot process this over this URL. Connection refused, method not allowed. Perfect. Let me just check. Okay, problem found. It was just because there was a bug and now it is being fixed. So here we can see we didn't get this one, so we should have updated our test case. But this is again a general way you'll be working with this test case. You'd select all the items except the one here, and then you'll say, okay, let's update the test case. And now we have created a new test case for this specific result, and thereby we are able to continuously improve our testing, being able to create test cases that are valid, etc. But now obviously we can see there are some errors here. We can go in and click diffs here. We can see that there is a new header. So headers will always be a problem when you're creating test cases for the first time. So we will do comparison again. And now hopefully it will fail a little less. And then that's just the idea. Go through all these different ones. There's a lot of these updated things that is giving us problems. Let's see. Do comparison. We can go in here and check on errors. So what are the different errors we're getting? This one here. there. So it removed these ones. There we can see the next. This one, I guess, should be okay. Okay, so now all errors is removed. So that means we have gone through a testing phase, and now we have seen everything is good, and hopefully it also on the top works out. Another way to create a test case is, this was the error, is if you are in your Iflow, we can open the Iflow here, and yeah, so to connect it with CPI helper, the URL we need to put in is obviously not on the integration suite system, but the Figaf tool here. If we have an Iflow here that's in trace, and we send in a message onto it, we will now see 24. A message has been sent. We can click here on the Figaf logo, and now we can see we'll create it, add it to our testing test suite. Let's just test 3 as the message expression, so we know what's going on. And what it will do is it will fetch all the payloads from this one and create a test case here. When we are creating recording, there's also other things that we can do on like order expressions, message partner existent, and we can download additional payloads. This would be MPL, persist method, data store entry, that will also be a part of the test case. We can go in and include specific step if we just want to select, this, and then they would be a part of this. Makes save before you do this, and then obviously you need to do the same in here, in the test configuration. And here we can see all the test expressions that has been added for this. Okay, but here we have our test case we just created. So we press create, select the environment that we want it to be used in, and now we have 2 test cases for it, a number, both actually the same payload, but same flows for this. We do have this thing about shared configuration, and shared configuration is if we want to do specific scenarios for a specific Iflow. So if we have a test case, we can go and select a test case for this, and then we can go in and set up specific data for it and how we want to handle it. So let's just see, this is with mock services. We have just one test case on it, and let's just check here, go to our test cases. So we can run these 2, and we can select run, and what we would then see, as I would expect it to, is we would have our monitoring message here. We will see that 6/26. So this one has been processed on the normal one, and in a little while we will also see one that's been processed on Figaf mock. If we open this one, we can then see the thing is this HTTP endpoint here, configuration here for this. So this is calling the Figaf tool, and that thereby we can mock all the endpoints. No need to do anything except just adding the small checkpoint. And when we are looking then at our testing results, we can see they have been processed successfully. This is the test case, test runs. So there's still this number 3 here still being processed. We can go here and view results, and likely we will see there will be some differences because the header will be different. And we can easily navigate to it, see the details on it like this. Okay. Yeah. Let's just keep it in the background. It's counting, and it will be processing messages soon. It needs to ensure that the Iflow has been deployed before you can start fetching messages from it. So yeah, sometimes it takes a little while. You can see details on the polling here. What's going on if it's fetched messages. So it didn't fetch the messages first time, so we're going to try again. See if it will. Sometimes it just goes skipped, but the message has now been processed. So there is sometimes a little delay, and there's just a new set of headers that needs to be ignored. So that's how to fix these challenges. So one of the things is, obviously, when you're making such changes, we have the option in the tool to go in here in our tracked objects. So we have this get customer 2 that we worked on. So let's create a ticket for it. Not ideal here. So here we can go and assign to a ticket test on our landscape. Release is not really used. You can use it for some additional or capabilities. Here in the test cases, we can then look up the different test cases that we created and assign them to our test suite. So I have an old one. Let's just add these 2 ones to it. And now I can run it on this as a part of this test. And this makes it a lot more powerful when you're starting the transport, because from in here you can obviously see the last testing result, how the test was run. But in the test, and this is what you would get when you're running, you would then see a success or a failure on the test process when creating transport, and this just makes it so much more powerful. Okay, let's get back and see if we covered everything. Swap, center, test base, create test cases, run test cases, shared configuration, where we would be using mocks or something else for these specific scenarios. You can also use APIs to work with these things, and so if you have external testing tools or integration transport process, you can run those also via the tool. And you have mocking endpoints. If you're using on-premise, you need to set up the cloud connector for it. There is this thing about nested loops. So in general, we use this camel multicast index, but we would have some scenarios where you have multiple nested elements into it. Maybe it's more synthetic cases, but then you need to create a property called Figaf multi-index or split index, where you can add these things, and these would be used for the validations. Attachments, you have this option. You can say fetch additional payloads. Try and transport the iflows you have in, and then there's the part about updating the test cases. Okay, monitor. It's important. We want to monitor. We have 2 ways of monitoring. So we have one, how the CPI is performing. It does give you some insight on this, and in Neo it was really good. We could see tenant usage, memory usage, but in Cloud Foundry we don't have those capabilities. We can see latency, monitoring status, number of long-running processes. The other part of monitoring is statistical overview. Here you can see how many messages has been processed. And let's just enable this. This is really nice. Here it's just about enable statistics, but let's set it up here. So the idea is you will go in here onto the agent, select here, edit, go to the support tool, enable monitoring, enable statistics. That would enable you to do this, and then you just press save. And then it will, every 5 minutes, will go in and pick messages into the statistical overview. So here you will be able to see how many messages has been processed on a given interface in a period of time. And this will simplify a lot of the operations that you have. So let's check back on that later. Good. So here to enable it. Monitoring, we also have our own monitor, and this is about creating tiles for specific users that would be able to show different data for the users. This would be, okay, let's see who has access to, yeah, you'll create one for finance, one for specific groups. And here you can show a lot more than in the details scenarios. And here you will go in and you can create specific tiles with a number of different iflows, criterias, edge or non-edge use cases, and all will be showed in one tile with all the details that you need. You can export it as CSV, where you can see all this data. So if you as a business owner want to do more validations on it, you can add it here. You can see the details. You can see all the MPL attachments, payloads that have been assigned to it. Good. Let's just try to set that up. There. So to create this, we go to CPI message monitor. We can see there's already one here that's for default that has everything. But if we wanted to, we can go in here in edit mode, create a new one, test. We can select which statuses we want to filter, if it needs to be edge, the period, last 3 hours, and at different criteria. Or we just want to select a specific iflow. For it. So it's just in this last 3 hours. We can see here messages that's been processed. We can see the details. We have this Excel report. We can see persist data entries in here and view them. It's not really the best data in this example, but this makes it really easy to give access to all of these different components. So let's see here. Now we have the overview. Here we can go in different periods and see how many messages has been processed weekly on these things. The way we're doing this is every 5 minutes we will download a number of different messages, fetch these header priorities, see what we have. We can show the group them, and you can then drill in and just see these specific messages. This makes it a lot easier to manage for these scenarios. Alerting is obviously another important topic. This is, yeah, being able to send messages out when someone happens. We do have this thing about restart process, but I think with GMS, this should not be something you would be working on. We generally recommend that you set up an SMTP provider. If you don't have one, you can see here how to use Gmail and enable it on your Gmail account. But obviously you should send it out from your private or company SMTP server, which I get is going to be challenging in a number of different scenarios. Okay, so let's just go a little into this. The thing is, you want to create here a new consumer on the integration suite system. You will then say failed. Failed. You can test the condition. So here you can put in the OData query if you want to do it for specific criteria, and now it has scheduled that job. If you then go here and pull alert, you'll then see all the messages that has been failed in this specific period, but we don't have any errors on the system, which is a little bad for this. The idea is you can go in and create rules for these. So here we have a rule. We can set up if we should notify immediately, or if it's a retry error, we can go in and set status for what should be done with it. But the general part is you need to create an XPath that covers what this is going on, what's the problem here. And then once you've done that, you can go in, send it to an email, send it to an HTTP webhook for these things. So that's the short level on how to filter these messages. Get informed about it, and the idea is you would continuously be adding these XPath, with the lowest numbers being something that happens often, and then it becomes more and more specific the higher number these steps is, and all iflows will be caught at step number 100, and this would then be the default rule you'll add to your users. Email is obviously configured out here, where you'll enable email for all the different scenarios. Okay, let's go back. Now we come to one of the really nice features. So Groovy development is something that as an integration developer cannot really avoid. And the idea is we want to create something that makes it easy for you to work on your Groovy. Allow you to reuse your test cases, allow you to work on all these specific things. And that's why, yeah, you should have Figaf running, you should have synchronized some packets, and then you need to enable scripting. You can do test-driven development working on your XSLTs. With this, we do have ChatGPT. Hey, this is our AI capabilities that would be working here. Here you can go in on a global level and send up data that needs to be copied or work with. And we have the same for XSLT, making it possible for you to manage all of this in just one UI with all the capabilities. We do have Git for more development, focus, better code quality, all these different things, but that's a different topic, much more advanced and much more specialized for different use cases. So let's see how this works. So the main idea is on an agent. You need to go in here on the agent level and say enable IDE. Then we have the IDE. That means if I'm on this iflow here, I have my script here. Let's just do the. So didn't I have a? So I have a mapping here. This is an XSLT script. It's the same no matter what you're using. We have this button here open in the Figaf tool. We are in the mock, so it shouldn't be. We shouldn't use it from mock. This is a better one. Right. Because on the mock we don't have this mapping of endpoints. But if we go here to it, so we can navigate from in here. We have the XSLT. So we can select it here, and then we can open it, the IDE. Here we can then see what test cases we have. If we don't have anything specific for here, we can reset the filters. But let's just select this one and select one of the payloads here. We can also override and select any part. Now we have an input document here. We can run it. So right now it's XSLT. It's running locally on the Figaf tool. If we make a modification here, run it again, we can do the comparison, and then we can see what was the difference between these two ones. If we wanted to integrate with ChatGPT, we have the Figaf bot that on an agent level you can go in, or an application level you can enable. But we can also copy the input, and we have different ways of copying this. So we can either do it minimized for ChatGPT integrations, anonymized. So if we do this, let me just put it in here, where it will replace all the different values with something else. And this, we believe, is a much better way of working, that you can specify the different scenarios. So the idea is obviously once you go in here and are satisfied with a new change, and done all your comparisons, seen, yep, this is okay, you'll then go in and you say upload. You can also you can run it on the Integration Suite system and see how it performs there. That takes a little longer, and this will enable you to use all the XSLT 3.0 capabilities with integrations. And we can see it gives you some more header properties that's being set here. and now we can just upload it, upload and synchronize, and then that means that this has now been uploaded in our integration suite system. So we can see here. We upload it to country 1, and if we go here to our Iflow, it is now in status edit mode. We need to save it as a version, and then we can synchronize it again. So we don't want to save it as a version, we want you to take the responsibility of this, and now we can synchronize it. We can now see here there's a new version, and we can go in here in our versioning in the Figaf tool, compare these two, not the draft one, but this one. Payload, we will see the specific change that we made, making it a lot easier for us to manage this these code changes. And it's precisely the same thing if we are looking at a Groovy script. So we can open any. So let's see a demo Groovy script here. We have the IDE for it. We also have test cases for it. For this one, no. I guess maybe it's probably not used. We can run the data here. This takes a little longer because first time you need to deploy a specific version of the Iflow, a specific Iflow that will be updated with all these artifacts. If you want your jars to be a part of this, you need to add them to this, and then you can deploy the Iflow and use that in some more format. So now we're getting something about a local variable text. Let's try one of the other ones. Groovy set PL headers. Is this used? So now we're getting data back from the cloud integration system. And if you don't believe me, we can see here in the message monitoring tool here, we can see the script executor has been run. And now we actually got an error here, so we can pull here the errors. And now we can see an error here in the tool, and we can go in and create a new rule for it. Sample rule, what is it that we are supposed to be checking here? Save it, and now we have a new rule for this specific case. So that was all I wanted to cover in this this video. We will probably create some other ones on different topics on this, but I do hope that this gives you a good understanding of where you can use the Figaf tool to, and just get started exploring all these capabilities. I guess we have the statistics overview here. We didn't show how many messages have been processed in the last hour in the system, long-running processes, all these really nice, useful features. And there's obviously a lot more going on, building more integrations as we get along. I really hope you enjoyed this and you can see the benefits of using these things. If there's something that I obviously encourage you to try out, see what the different capabilities are, explore what's possible. If something doesn't work, reach out to the support@figaf.com, and we'll see if we can help you resolve some of these issues that you would be exploring. So thanks for listening. Thanks for attending. Please hit like and then go explore what the tool can do for you in your integration scenario.